Hey everybody out there, this is Seto, and today for you guys, we're going to be doing a little bit of an interesting video. I came up with this idea for this video because I've been helping a friend out recently, a friend I met. And I've been helping him get back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! He hasn't been played probably since GX era. And he's getting back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And helping him out, it reminded me of me after I took my break from the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! For about 2 years. And it reminded me of other players I've seen. And this is a common thing in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That you see very often. And that is old school players coming back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, everybody takes a break from Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe for a couple of months because it gets stale or boring. But I'm talking players have stepped away from the game for like 2-3 years, and they're coming back into the game now. And the obstacles they have to overcome. And I know a lot of you, a lot of my viewers and subscribers out there fall into this category. I would assume that a lot of you guys, at least for some sort of period of time, especially older school players out there, took a break from the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! For a good amount of time. And when you came back into the game, you had to overcome obstacles. And for you newer players out there, you've probably recognized these people at locals or wherever you go to. The older school players that are getting back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm here to talk about that learning curve they have to overcome. And if you are an old school player getting back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, these are some things you're going to have to overcome. And this comes from personal experience. For me, this is coming from watching other players get back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And things they have to understand and just cope with and overcome, because it is a big hurdle. The longer period of time you've been away from this game, the harder it is to learn everything. So let's go over a couple of the things that I believe are true to people, the obstacles they have to overcome. First off, your old school cards don't work in the new school age of Yu-Gi-Oh! Good examples. So many times have I seen an old school player make his first deck, getting back into the game. He could have been a great player back in the day. I'm not joking. I have known players like that. But coming back into the game, they haven't paid attention to the game in 5-6 years. And they come back into this game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're like, oh, Sakuretsu Armor is a good card still. Rageki's back? That's too strong. I mean, yes, Rageki's a good card, but you know what I'm trying to say here. Oh, my Blue Eyes White Dragon's still a very powerful card. Oh, Dark Magician, is the best deck ever. And granted, I love those cards to death, but they're not going to beat Necros anytime soon. Sorry, Blue Eyes, I love you, baby. But you know what I'm trying to say. Your old school cards sometimes are going to, not be as effective because the game has changed completely since back in the day. Sakuretsu Armor, there's better cards than Sakuretsu Armor now. The battle phase is not as, destroying monsters in the battle phase is not as good. Destruction is not as good as, sending something back to the deck or the extra deck. It's not as good anymore as it used to be. That is something that I've always found that old school players have to overcome getting back into the game. That the way they grew up, yes, that was correct back in the day when they were playing, is not the same mindset as it is now. The game has changed completely, it's evolved completely differently, the way it's played is completely differently. You have to cope with that. And that's some of your older school favorite cards, the cards you loved as a kid. Injection Fairy Lily Girl, Jinzo sometimes, may not be as powerful as they once were, sadly. Sad face here. But that is something some players have to cope with. Other things they have to cope with is the vast knowledge of the card pool and how much is expanded. And I'm talking XYZs, synchros, just new cards coming out from when they stopped playing the game. How many new cards have come out? I mean, if they haven't played since GX or 5Ds even, there's a wide gap of new cards that have come out, since then that staple, or they're just a lot better than the older school cards with the upgrades or older, how can I say this? When knowledge, like I've said before, is important to the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Knowledge is key. Knowing different cards so you can build efficient decks, playing against other decks, you know what those cards' interactions are, you know what those other decks do. And if you're an old school player coming back to the game, there's a wide knowledge gap between you and probably the opponent you're facing off against if he's been in this game consistently or has had his hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, for a long period of time. With Yu-Gi-Oh! He knows, a vast amount of cards sometimes. He knows the cards, he knows archetypes, stuff like that. And you're at a disadvantage being an old school player if you're coming back into the game because you don't know these things. You always are like reading the cards like, what's this new card? What's this new card? How does this work? Oh my gosh, that's broken. He just summoned 5 monsters by pendulum summoning. What the fudge? That's what I see sometimes. And granted, I'll admit, I'll be like, yeah, it is broken, dude. It is. I know it is. And in my heart, I know it's broken. But it's so hard for those players to sometimes wrap their minds around the vast card pool because it's like, okay, so let me give you an example. It's like reading a Harry Potter book, okay? But you only read to book 2, okay? But you never read the ending, you never read the middle, you just stopped. You don't know what happens past that, and then you're picking up the book, at the final book, I forget the final book of Harry Potter. And you don't know anything what happened in between. So it's kind of, you have to fill in the space there. You have to learn, what happened between book 1 and the final book. You have to understand what happened. Otherwise, you don't understand the full story. That's what I'm trying to say. They have to wrap their hands around the knowledge, the card pool, the decks, the archetypes that are current and viable. That's something they have to understand. And that's something they have to cope with. And I've been there, done that, and it's hard sometimes. Even if you take a break for a year or 2, it's really hard, believe me. The game can change so quickly on a dime nowadays. Banned cards. That's my number 3 thing, I guess you could say. How many times, me, myself included, from when I was little, that I'll be like, oh my gosh, Pot of Greed's still legal, this card's still legal, and you're going through a commons box trying to find good cards, and you're like, oh, this card's still legal. Nope, it's banned. Pot of Greed, and it could have been banned 3 years ago, but it's, for them, when they flash play the game, that card was legal. So they don't know that, and that's something that they have trouble with understanding, like, well, why is it banned? Why was this card broken? There are some good examples of this. Things like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, some old school banned cards, but I really can't think of right now. But they're like, well, why is that banned? Well, Rescue Cat. Okay, we'll use Rescue Cat. Why was Rescue Cat banned? That card wasn't doing anything. Oh, X-Sabers happened. And they kind of broke the deck. You have to explain that to them. And granted, same thing has happened to me. Fishberg Blaster. Why was it banned? Oh, okay, now I know why it's banned. Happens to everybody. Believe me, even sometimes there are banned cards, I'm like, why was this on the ban list? Why was this put on the ban list? Why was put this on the limited list? Why? Huh? And I have to ask somebody to refresh my memory why that happened. Other thing I guess you could say is that the game's speed, and this is another key thing that I've noticed with old school players coming back, or just in general, players that take a break for like a year even. You've probably noticed this. If you took a break for, since Dragon, well, I won't say that now because Dragon Ball format was very fast. But if you've taken a break since maybe Gear Gear, Hand, Artifact, Trap Tricks, and Gear format a year ago, and then you came back into the game a year later, the game sped up a lot. Shadalls, Clifforts, Necros, Stellar Knights, etc. The list goes on. Burning Abyss. Decks are more fast-paced now than they were a year ago even. It happens every year. The game gets a little bit faster. Each and every year it gets a little bit faster, a little bit more, things rely more on searching, things rely more on drawing, things rely on more floating. It's slowly going up there, and that's power creep. But you sometimes have to cope with that the card that was good just a year ago is no longer good anymore because the game's gotten too fast for it. Pot of Duality is somewhat a good example. Pot of Duality, still a great card, no matter what anybody says, but it is somewhat not as good as it used to be because everything's special summons now. If you get where I'm trying to go with that. Not everything, but you get what I'm trying to say there. So these are some things that personally, from personal experience and personally watching others, older school players have to cope with when they get back in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to understand these things that, yeah, the game's changed a lot. Has it changed for the better? That's up for debate. That's another video. But it has changed, and to adapt and to survive in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to change with it, otherwise you'll be left behind in the dust. Yes, I know, I still love playing my old school decks, and I still think they're good to some extent, but they're not always going to be meta. They're not going to always be top tier meta. So that's just a little thought. I hope I can upload. I will upload it. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I'm not even sure if I'm going to upload it because I feel like I didn't do a good job, but it was just something spur of the moment. Talking to one of my buddies, and I've seen him getting back into the game, and we're teaching him, and he's still having trouble with learning card interactions, and he's a good player, but he's got everybody's got to learn. And the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, if you're not learning in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, then you're not playing the game right, because you should always be learning every time you do new things, new interactions maybe, new concepts, new things like that. You should always be learning the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, expanding your knowledge if you want to become a better player, I feel like. But that's a topic for a different day. I still want to do that video on knowledge, but I want to think about it a little bit more and do it justice, because that's something that I really want to talk about with you guys. A good conversation about. A good conversation, my lads. So, tell me what you think. What do you think of some of the things that older school players, or just players that have taken a break, have to cope with and combat when they're coming back into the game of Yu-Gi-Oh? Tell me down below. I know there's probably a couple of things I've missed. Some of you older school players probably can tell me, and I look forward to reading your comments down below, guys. Until next time, good luck dueling, have fun dueling, and I'll see you guys next time. Seto Kaba Maf, you guys. Till next time, take care, everybody, and have a great day. And hope you enjoy this video, by the way.